Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I'm in search of England, continuing my quest to find out England and Englishness. And what could be more English than Richard Suggett, for one thing, the lovely Richard Suggett, in his allotment. And I wanted to find out about gardening, because the English have an obsession with gardening, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And it's gone on for hundreds of years, our obsession with gardening.
I was talking to an American on the phone, one of our patrons actually, Jeff Kellison, and he was saying, we don't do allotments. We don't do allotments in America. And I said, oh, don't you? He said, well, you know, we have so much space. Our gardens are huge.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
So anyway, let's talk about gardening first of all, or the process of growing stuff, because I know that right from the days of, well, once the hunter-gatherers started to sort of settle, they had to grow stuff, didn't they?
That's right, yes. The early man became the farmer, and that's developed our modern culture, I guess would be the right way to say it.
Yeah, and I was reading that some of the things that they grew then, some of the things like wheat and barley, or the primitive version of the wheat and barley we have, we're obviously still eating those staples today.
Absolutely, yeah. We've made many different variations of the certain plants and products, but at its primordial beginnings, it's still the same stuff.
It's still the same stuff. And then, of course, the Romans came in. Yeah. And when the Romans came in, of course, they came from overseas and hotter climes and things, bringing things like marrows and vines and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. A lot of herbs, basil, rosemary, oregano, things like that we use on a daily basis.
And we just take that for granted. Yeah. But, you know, it goes right back to sort of 2,000 years.
Oh, absolutely. Well, even the humble potato, you know, that's only 500 years ago we've known about it in this country.
Right.
Before that, it was Christopher Columbus who found it in South America and brought it over, but it's developed so far in that short amount of time. Originally, it was a tiny little tuber.
And now we get all sorts of lovely ones.
There's 2,000 different varieties or something, I've heard.
Is there? Of potatoes. And so when you go to the supermarket, you get like Maris Piper and King Edwards and, you know, and baby, you know, something they call baby potatoes, which you just don't know, well, what is it? It's just a baby potato. The Anglo-Saxons, we don't know too much about what they grew, but
they did start allotments.
Did they?
There's evidence that they had, or they created the first allotments.
Right.
It didn't last for all that long with the Anglo-Saxons, but there is evidence out there that they existed.
I know that when you would get into the feudal system, you had the three-field system, but people still had a little bit of area around their hovels that they must have lived in, where they might have had a cow and a pig and a chicken or whatever, and presumably herbs and things that you weren't growing on a great big strip, which might have been barley or whatever. So they must have had that.
Yes.
And then as you go through history, what do we get up to next? I suppose you get into the Normans and that sort of period.
Yes, and I think the Norman period was probably when more and more people, or medieval period right up till the Industrial Revolution, more and more people were growing their own food in their gardens.
Right.
And it was just common. It's what people did, and that's how they survived. And if you think of the manor estates and how they would have huge kitchen gardens all created to create the right microclimates to grow their vegetables, there's a lot of science behind what's gone on, and a lot of history that's
absolutely, because those manors with their gardens and things that they needed to grow, the type of things they grew, and the feasts that they had, especially when you got into the sort of Tudor period, the things that they needed were quite extensive.
Absolutely, yes.
And then presumably they were importing things, of course, because we were a seafaring nation, and so the rich would have some very wonderful things that the commoner would have no concept of.
No. I think growing pineapples was quite, I mean, this is more the Victorian period now, but growing pineapples in the UK was such a big stately thing to do.
Yes.
It was a sign of how rich you were if you could grow your own pineapple on your land.
Right. Oh, yes. Well, there you go. And that's why you see pineapples, don't you? You see carvings or sculptures of pineapples in that sort of Victorian period.
On the walls above driveways, things like that.
Which I guess demonstrates that they're sophisticated,
yes,
and cultivated, quite literally. The Victorian period was a period after the Industrial Revolution where I gather that allotments really started to come into their own.
Yes, there was a member of Parliament who became very worried that as the Industrial Revolution began and people were leaving the countryside and moving into the big towns and cities,
yes,
they were not getting the same nutritional value. They were not getting that supply of fresh fruit and veg.
You couldn't nip down to your supermarket, could you?
Well, not in the same way as we can now. Not like we do now. No, it was fridges didn't exist,
right?
So there was no way to keep your food throughout the winter anyway. So
and I mean, a lot of those factory workers and people were so poor. The only thing they could do was grow a pitiful amount of vegetables, I suppose.
Yes,
but they could grow them and they were fresh.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And I gather that at the end of the First World War, there was an Act of Parliament or something that transpired to help the returning soldiers come back from the war and get them back into ordinary life by giving them space to develop a garden.
Selsey in that sort of area is quite well known for that. There was a lot of, I can't remember the correct term for it, but they were given plots of land, a bit like small holdings,
right,
in order to, also bring the country up to its feet again.
And of course, the whole growing of food and all of that became very prevalent during the First World War and the Second World War with the Dig for Victory.
Yes, well, the Dig for Victory actually started in the First World War.
Yeah. But
it was hailed as a success, but it wasn't as successful as it was in the Second World War.
They got their act together.
They knew what they were doing.
Yes.
And unfortunately, as a country, we were forced into that sort of, we had to grow our food again.
Yes.
And I mean, people turned up their gardens to grow food. There were any side of a road that was turned into growing food. Anywhere they could find a patch of land, that was it. They were growing food on it.
Now, though, I mean, gardening, I suppose the other side of gardening, not just food, is the flowers and the designing your bit of land so that it looks beautiful, smells beautiful, and has different purposes, peaceful, somewhere to sit and contemplate. Again, you could go through the whole history of all of that, because that's all changed with knot gardens in the Tudor period and the Italianate gardens and such and such.
And fashions change as well throughout the years. So
but there is, going back to the Englishness, programs on the television about gardening. We can fix your garden in 2 minutes.
Yes.
The gardening question time on the radio.
Well, that's the longest running radio show in the UK.
And the amazing thing about that is, talking about gardening, you don't see anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there's YouTube channels with gardens. There's a podcast that you run about veg growing in your garden or in your allotment. And there does seem to be an obsession. Is it just the English or the British? Let's include everybody else around in the Isles. Or is that unique to us? I mean, presumably the Germans and other Europeans, the other countries across the world must do gardening, but we seem to be more obsessed than anybody else.
I mean, other countries are definitely obsessed with gardening as well. It's not just a British obsession.
Right.
But there are British gardens are the envy of the world because we have such perfect conditions for growing food in.
So the climate. And the soil.
Yeah, we get those. You fly over England, you see that patchwork of the greens and the yellows. We've got this lovely moist soil. I've been down to the Caribbean where it's incredibly dry, and you think it's really lush, but they say it's very difficult to maintain the moisture levels.
So we just geographically happen to be in a very favourable part of the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that makes us the envy of the world.
Yeah. I've spoken to many gardeners all over the world, and they've just gone, you don't know how lucky you are. And we moan about the weather here.
Yes.
If there's British are well known for moaning about the weather, but we don't realise how lucky it is until we see that.
Well, we're filming in winter. It's February and it's mid-February now, and I guess the winter veg is out, but we're going to get into the spring. You're going to be busy on your allotment here.
Yes, incredibly busy.
I guess the time starts to start getting on where you see everybody out and about. Richard, for those that don't know, runs the Veg Grower Podcast. Just put Veg Grower Podcast into a search engine, it'll pop up. You also make videos about what you do.
Yes, vlogs.
So tune into those. But thank you so much for telling me a bit about the English obsession and a little bit of the history of it. It's been great in my search for Englishness. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe. Give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Check out Richard's podcast. And I'll see you on the next one. Till then, bye-bye.
Bye.